So let's get right into how to play Super Famicom games. There's a very quick and easy way to play Japanese cards on an American system, but you have to do a little bit of playing around first. See, Japanese cards actually have a little flat back, whereas US cards have two little slats on the back of them. That's because US Super Famicoms, or US Super Nintendos, actually have on the inside two little slats that the cart slides into, which prevents you from playing a Japanese game. But these can be taken out very quickly and without any damage to the Super Nintendo if you just take a pair of wire cutters, or a pair of pliers will work as well if you're very careful. Slide them in so that the flat back of the wire cutters hits the back of the Super Nintendo. Slide down, carefully press down, and then jiggle out the two little tabs. When they're all taken out, your Japanese Super Famicom cards will actually slide right in there, and it'll be nice, clean, and you can play them right away.
Or you can always use a game doctor.
Yeah, or you could use a game doctor. What?
Oh yeah!
So yeah, gaming pirates have been around since the very early days of computer gaming. But these systems that they used were pretty innovative for the market, and they allowed for games to be copied and saved from one area to another. I'm going to be talking about one of these systems in particular, the Game Doctor 7. Known in Chinese as Chao Ren Bo Shi, which literally means Super Nintendo Doctor, the Game Doctor was one of a long line of game backup devices made by Bung Enterprises. I said enterprises. Buying games in China was really expensive back in the day, as the high cost of ROM chips could make some games go up to $80 per game or more. So there was a gap in the market for piracy. Bung Enterprises was just one of the many companies who produced successful SNES copiers. Farfront East, as well as Success, and many others also competed in this market, but Bung was by far one of the most popular. In addition, Bung also produced copiers for sale in the US as well. These copiers went under the name of Dr. SF and were available generally through special mail order catalogs and independent sellers. The Game Doctor basically worked like a souped up cartridge emulator. It has built-in memory which can store games, a floppy and a cartridge slot for backing up and playing games with, and underneath the Game Doctor you actually even have an area for storing extra RAM to the device, which allows you to hold more games in memory at any given time to avoid loading. How it works is you stick a game into the copier. You start it up, copy the data out of the cartridge onto the built-in RAM, and then make a copy of it on a 3.5-inch floppy. You can then load your floppy disks to play the game at any time you want without the cartridge. The device also allowed you to back up and write SRAM for sharing and transferring, which was especially useful if you rented RPG games from a store and you wanted to back up your save data, though you probably would have just backed up the game as well. On the back of the device is a parallel port for the computer. With this port, you could hook up a CD-ROM and read games from that, or you could connect it directly to your PC and transfer games that way. Now, I'm told that buying games from Chinese stores back in the day was actually really rather interesting, as a lot of these stores would have legitimate copies of the games on their walls, but then they'd also have a folder hidden behind the counter. You'd ask for the folder, they'd bring it out, presuming you knew that they sold pirated material, and then you'd look through the covers for all the games that they had and the ones that you wanted. You'd pick one out and it would quickly be copied off or taken from a stack of pre-copied games and given to you. Usually they came with a printed label or a colored graphic label of that game. So why not just buy a legitimate copy? Well, like I said, those would have been very expensive, and in the store, they might have only been props for the police. Seriously, if the police ever came by one of those stores, all they'd have to do is claim that they only sold legitimate products on their walls. Now, this way has changed in China nowadays, as many pirating places now store and produce copies in the back of cars and vans that can be mobile should the cops arrive. Now, Super Famicom and Super Nintendo games are stored in a particular format on the Game Doctor. Each company that made these products had their own little format because they didn't want any other companies using their devices, and the format even changed from generation to generation too. But Game Doctor formatted games were one of the more popular formats. In fact, it became the format that's used on the web nowadays too. Now, there is not a happy ending for Bung. Nintendo eventually sued them out of existence, so now they're just a part of history. But their devices are still traded and used to this day. In fact, not all their devices were used for piracy. Many software developers for the Super Nintendo actually ended up buying their copiers from Bung, because the real Nintendo development kits were in short supply and they were really expensive too. Probably thousands of dollars compared to a $200 to $300 copier. It's one fact Bung pointed out in court, as it sold these devices as a development kit for programming and not for piracy. In fact, some companies actually made it impossible to pirate games on their copiers, unless you opened up the machine and modified it. Just one way to plausibly deny that its primary use was for pirating. Now, if you do happen to find one of these devices, then you have to be very careful with what kind of power adapter that you use. It has to have enough power to get the device going, but not too much or the wrong kind, or it'll blow out your expensive little system and possibly even your console. And if you're using this system with a Super Nintendo, then you'll have to find something to prop up the back with, as if you leave it as is, it could bend the connector bridge. As for how to use the system, yeah, I'm not going to go into that. I mean, this whole thing is really pushing the line even for me. So why am I doing it then? Well, I think it's very interesting because it's a part of Super Famicom history, as well as the history of gaming in China. I don't get a lot of imports usually from countries outside of Japan, so anytime that I can learn about a new country's gaming systems, it's very interesting. Wait a second. Yankee!
What?
How do you know about the Game Doctor, and why do we have this one?
Well, you have the Gun Hazard game anyways, and I thought you could use it to back up other games. Hey, carts only last so long.
It'd be really dangerous to do that, man. I could get into a lot of trouble.
Well, then don't use it. Put it on the shelf as part of your collection or something. Nothing says you have to use it. Sheesh.
Well, he's got a good point. I don't have to use... Hey... I do have the real card of Gun Hazard. Ooh.
You think that you can play this? Now you can. You think that you can play this? Let's see what he says. I know that you can play this. The only thing you follow to Wario, you can play this.